All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of the podcast. I'm Kaylee.
My name is Maegan.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about the Florida Trail, which is a network that spans the entire length of the state, but you've probably never heard of. Something that most people are a little bit more familiar with, or at least if you're in like the hiking, backpacking, outdoor space, a lot of people have heard of the Appalachian Trail. So the Appalachian Trail is a 2,200-mile trail that goes from the state of Georgia up through 14 states and ends at Baxter State Park in Maine. So that was actually it was based off of the Long Trail, which is the first trail in the U.S., which is out of Vermont. It's like 250 miles through the Green Mountains. Beautiful, very tough hiking trail. And that inspired the Appalachian Trail. And the whole idea of the Appalachian Trail was that anybody along that eastern seaboard in those states could escape to this little piece of nature and get out. It actually wasn't intended to be something that people hiked all in one go. The idea was that anybody in the stress of life would like come out for the weekend and have a little slice of nature in their backyard, essentially. Fast forward, 50, 100 years, and people actually started through hiking it completely. Actually, the first guy to do it was a guy named Schaefer, and he was a World War II veteran, and he was walking off the war. And he basically started in Georgia and decided, I'm just going to go and do the whole thing. And that kicked off a whole culture of through hiking, which is taking a long distance trail and hiking the whole thing, just going for it. Like I said, most people are going to be familiar with the Appalachian Trail. If you are listening from this and you're from the West Coast, you might have heard of the PCT, the Pacific Crest Trail. So that one goes from the border with Mexico all the way up through California, Oregon, Washington, and ends at the border with Canada. You walk border to border. There's also a large one that's known as the CDT, the Continental Divide Trail. Same thing, Mexico to Canada, except that time you're going to go through New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, a little bit of Idaho, and Montana, ending up at the border. None of that has to do with Florida, but I am setting us up to talk about the fact that there are actually 11 national scenic trails in the U.S., and one of them is in Florida. And I think a lot of people actually haven't heard of the Florida Trail. I am a huge fan of backpacking. Like I said, I actually thru hiked the AT in 2022 with my then boyfriend, now husband, Jared, and we had a fantastic time. And it kind of has become my whole personality. Anytime I get time off, we're going backpacking and stuff. So I'm super passionate about this. And I was like, oh, we should do an episode about the Florida Trail. I'm hoping that a lot of the people that hike the Florida Trail will find a lot of cool information in this podcast. And as I started looking at the numbers and was like, oh, how many people hike the Florida Trail each year? I was pulling up numbers like 15 to 20 people actually finish a through hike. And I was like, that can't be me. That's way too small. But I'm realizing more and more as I research this that this is actually a really niche subject. So I'm going to tell you guys more about it, a little bit about history, and also just kind of get into through hiker culture, because I'm realizing that the things that are now second nature to me, a lot of people may have never heard of. And the questions that I get asked 30 times that I think everyone probably knows the answers to already don't. So Megan's going to help balance my extreme nerdiness on the subject out today and hopefully ask.
I'm excited to listen to this one because I do not, or it's not that I'm not interested in it, but I have never done a through hike. I probably won't do one for a little bit of time. It's not entirely like my passion. So I'm excited to hear about it, especially because it is her passion and I do like hearing about it. So I'm very excited to get to listen for this episode. And maybe I'll decide that I want to plan my next trip soon.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that's really cool about this is no matter where you are in the state, you're probably not that far away from it. So I know you're not. I'm actually in Sarasota. Technically, like
I feel like actually you're farther away than I am. There's actually a lot. I looked up a map when you said that we were going to go over this. I did end up looking at a map because I was just curious. And I'm actually extremely close to like several parts of it. I'm extremely close to.
You don't know it
you're
yet,
like farther away than I am for it.
Absolutely. Yeah. You don't know it yet, but there's definitely going to be a week that we do a section. And we're like, hey, Megan, Come pick up me. Thank you. Your transportation plan. Or we're hitchhiking to your house.
Either one's a good one.
Yeah. So the Florida Trail is currently about 1,500 miles long, or 2,414 kilometers. Now, to put that in perspective, the AT is 2,200 miles. So the Florida Trail is only 700 miles less than the Appalachian Trail, and the Appalachian Trail goes through 14 states. The Florida Trail is just Florida.
That's trippy.
Yeah, exactly. So the Florida Trail has two terminuses. You can start at either end. So the northern terminus is Gulf Islands National Seashore, or like Pensacola area, which I actually didn't realize that was like a national protected seashore. So that's really cool. The southern terminus is in the Big Cypress National Preserve, so Everglades, to oversimplify. The hiking season for this is basically late November through March, although a lot of people will start January 1st. If I was going to do it, I would do like a January through March type of deal. The biggest thing with that is that's the dry season, even though you can still get rain. It's the cold season, even though you can still have days in the upper 80s, 90s. It's going to be less bugs, although never no bugs in Florida. So that's what really determines that. I don't think, I don't know, actually. I don't have all the stats about like when people have done it. I'm sure that there's been people that have attempted like summer through hikes, but I can tell you from trying to car camp and do short backpacking camps during the summer, it can be absolutely miserable, and I do not recommend. According to a few articles that I researched, about 15 to 20-ish people complete it as a through hike every year. So,
is that a through hike? Like you probably gonna explain in a second, but is that a through hike for like all like in total, or is that Florida's like only 15 or so are doing it?
That's just the Florida Trail. So, like, for example,
Okay.
the AT, and the AT is the most popular. So the AT typically has 2,000 to 3,000 people that start each year. The year that we started, there were actually about 4,000 because there were a lot of people that were able to people come from all over the world to hike it. Like we met lots of Germans and lots of other folks out there. And so 2022 was a big year because after 2020, 2021, they couldn't get visas to come over. So 2022 was a big year. We had about 4,000, 4,500 people start, I believe. And the stats on finishing a through hike is about a quarter of the people that start will actually finish it. And so you can get a little bit nerdy about this. So there's a lot of different types of backpacking and hiking and everything. So any of these trails, you can go out and do like an overnight or a couple of nights trips and do like a section. So that would be section hiking. Some people will do big sections where instead of doing like the whole 6 months it takes to do the AT, they're going to go out and do 500 miles. And that's called a lash, or a long ass section hike.
That's funny.
There's so much jargon, so much through hiker jargon that I'm going to try not to bore everybody with. But so you can do sections, you can do a long ass section. Usually a through hike is defined as finishing the entire hike within a year. So it's not like you have to start and then end 3 months later. You don't have to do it all consecutive. You don't have to do it north to south or south to north. You can jump around and do it in any way. You can do 2 weeks, take 3 weeks off, get back out there for 5 weeks. But as long as you do that within a calendar year, that's considered a through hike.
That's cool. That's very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there are people that are more like purist about it. That like, oh, if I start at the south, I only am going to walk north. I'm going to see every blaze, and like blaze is like a paint mark that marks where the trail is. So I want to touch every single blaze, and I want to see all that. That's like the purist mentality. But there's plenty of people that are like, I'm out here for the experience, and eventually I'm gonna get to point B. So however I go about doing that is totally fine. Yeah, so I would assume if there's 15 to 20 people that are finishing it each year as a through hike, then that probably means there's like 60 to 100 that are attempting it. And there's a lot of reasons that people won't finish a through hike. A lot of things would be like, oh, they just were like, I think from an outsider's perspective, and I know this because I had family and friends say this to me, like, oh, we were just so mentally tough, this and that. And the mental game is really, really important for finishing a through hike, especially if you're trying to do it all straight through. Well, there's so many reasons that people will get off of a through hike. Undertraining is a thing, getting injured, and sometimes those injuries are completely out of your control. Family emergencies will take people off a trail. New job opportunities can take people off a trail, and also running out of money. If you just don't have enough money, or things cost more, or one of those injuries that like it did take you off trail at the beginning, but it cost you a lot of money, can take you off trail at the end. So there's lots of reasons people don't finish, because it's a monumental task. To walk that 1,500 miles, it's going to take about 2 to 3 months. So you have to devote 2 to 3 months of your time if you're going to try to do it straight through to walking. Lots more people than that 60 to 100 will be section hiking it and enjoying it. And like I said, anyone can jump on the trail for a day or a section. Like the Florida Trail is not just for through hikers. The Florida Trail is for everybody in the state to come out and enjoy it and hike sections and learn about nature and just be involved. There are a couple places that you'll need permits. So like Big Cypress National Preserve, Seminole Reservation, St. Mark's National Wildlife Refuge, and Eglin Air Force Base. Those places you'll need to have a permit. So if you're trying to hike through, you need to look into that. You can find all of this information on floridatrail.org. It's an awesome nonprofit. They've got the website. They have maps and everything, lots of information. So I'm highly, highly recommend, if you're interested in checking this out, go to that website, because you can find day hikes in your area. You can look at a map. You can buy paper maps and stuff. So before we get into the nitty gritty about the Florida Trail and everything, and also I don't want to walk you through every single stop. I want this to be something that inspires people to go out and check it out for themselves. I want to get into some of the more common questions about through hiking. Like I said, this is my thing. So why there's one of the biggest questions that you'll get as a through hiker is, why do you through hike? And the answers are as diverse as the people, from everything from because I wanted to, because it sounded cool, to trying to work through something. One of the first popular through hiker, I can't remember his name's Eric, but Schaefer, his last name was Schaefer. His thing was walking off the war, mental health. So a lot of people go out for mental health reasons. I know that when we decided we were going to through hike, we decided back in 2020 with COVID and everything, we're what are we doing with our lives? What do we want to be doing? How do we want to prioritize being outside, being active, and traveling? Through hiking is also a really affordable way to travel and see the country and see really unique parts of the state and see things on a very slow, very granular level. Most of the time, if you think about traveling, you're flying somewhere, you're doing this, you're booking tours, that you're going to these places, and everything might be really planned out, everything might be really hectic. When you're through hiking, all you have to do is walk. At the end of the day, all you have to do is walk. Oh, I also want to say, I'm going to be talking a lot about through hiking in the sense of walking, but a lot of these trails, you can actually ride them on horse, or you can ride a bike.
That's cool.
Yeah. So most of the National Scenic Trails, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think the AT, the Appalachian Trail, is the only one that is foot traffic only. Everything else, you can mountain bike, or you can ride horses. There's lots of different little things that you need to be aware of if you're going to do those things as opposed to walking. But there are multiple ways to enjoy these trails. So there's infinite reasons why people through hike. That's always a fun question to ask. And also sometimes the answer is just because I wanted to. Just because, why not? Life is short, let's do it. Now, another question that we get a lot is, where do you eat? Where do you sleep? How does this work? Do you pack, if you're going to be gone for 2 to 3 months, do you need to pack all that food? And the answer is no. We are not carrying multiple months of food at a time. What we'll do instead is, most of the time on these trails, you're going to get to a road crossing every 2 to 3 days, depending on where you are. On the AT, it's every 2 to 3 days. Other states, it might be a little more spread out, 3, 4, 5. And at that point, you'll either get a hitch, you'll stick your thumb out on the side of the road and get a ride with somebody into a store. Sometimes you can walk into town. Sometimes you can set up a shuttle, which is where there's a list of people who are called trail angels who are willing to come out and help people out. So they might do that in the form of giving rides or offering shuttle services where you pay somebody to give you a ride in town. And once you're in town, and by town, that's really loose too. Depending on where you are, that might be like a gas station, or it could be like a full grocery store, Walmart, who knows? It just depends on where you are. So each one's a little bit different. And you'll do your resupply or get all of the food that you need to go through the next section. So whether that's 3, 4, 5 days out, you'll do that. The other thing that you can do is a lot of people will send themselves boxes, which is great if you have like special dietary needs that you're like, hey, I'm like, for me, I'm gluten free. So I know if my resupply option is a gas station, I'm not going to be able to survive off of flour tortillas and tuna packets. So I need to send myself some more food. So you can send yourself boxes in the mail, and that's how you will do your resupply. So you pick up your box, put it in your food bag, and then you hike out. But going into town is really fun. It's crazy. Maegan knows this because I was just on the Arizona Trail in October. And the amount of pictures that she got of me eating tacos or burritos or whatever, nachos.
Nachos,
We'll have to
tacos,
attach the nachos picture. It's so funny the way that once you are spending several days out there in the woods the whole time, even though there's other people around, even though you might have packed really good food and everything, when you get to town and you get to get town food and a shower, like the whole world is just so much better. I think thru hiking is really cool and really fun for that like shift in what actually matters and what's important, because it brings you back to that like, I just want good food and good people and a shower. A shower's nice.
Showers are nice.
But yeah, so you don't have to pack all your food at once. You will go to the stores and buy food, or you will mail yourself food and you'll pick that up. Where do you sleep? So this is going to vary depending on the trail. But for example, like on the Florida Trail, you're going to pack a tent or a hammock that you sleep in. And there will either be designated campsites depending on like what area you're in, or you'll get to...
Oh, there's actually designated campsites?
Yeah, there are in certain sections. So like the places I was talking about where there's permits, there'll be actual campsites. So for like example, on the AT, there would be different spots marked like, okay, this is a designated campsite. And what you could usually rely on being there was a good water source or decent water source within a half mile. Times there would be a privy, so a space for you to go to the bathroom. That's like, might be like a little outhouse. It might not even have all 4 walls on it, but it's still plenty like cleaner than having to try to, if it's a really popular area, trying to like dig a hole. Otherwise, that's how you go to the bathroom out there, is you literally dig a little cat hole. You want 6 inches deep, several inches across. Do your thing, cover it up. And so, what was the original question? Oh, are there campsites? Yeah, so there are certain designated
I didn't know that.
I believe too, because I've seen pictures of it. There's a section in Central Florida where they actually have some like shelters that are like screened in for the bugs.
The bugs.
No, and
look at them go.
Like shelters on the AT, it would be like a 3-walled shelter that might have a raised platform that you can like set your air mattress up on, like the little blow up air mattress that you have. On the Florida Trail, the ones that looked like it was a raised platform, but it was screened in to help with the bugs and stuff. And I think there was only a handful. But they're like right off of the Swanee River, I believe, because there's actually a kayaking trail that you can do. So either there will be designated campsites, or what you'll do is you'll get good at looking for like, and we did this a lot on the Arizona Trail, looking for, oh, here is a flat spot. This is situated well. There's water here. I can bring water to this location. We're gonna go and set up here. So as you start backpacking more, you start really like identifying like what makes a good spot. We already covered using the bathroom, so pretty much anywhere. There will be certain places. I don't think that there's too many crazy rules in Florida so much. I know, especially out west in like the alpine areas, you got to be really careful about it. I actually did a trail in Washington where they had like privy stations set up, but you were literally pooping into a box that then someone's job was to come through, seal it up, and they had to helicopter it out. Your face looks so concerned.
Because
because
open the box, fine. But, and I get why they probably have to bring it out and things, and it does make total sense. Like, I get it. But I don't know. I guess I was just thinking about how that person's job, and I'm just like, I hope they get paid well. Or I hope that they really love their passion so much and that this part of the job makes it totally worth it. Because if not,
it's probably the most beautiful place I've ever hiked. So I guess you're there, you know? And
yeah.
the reason that they have to do that is because there's like thousands of people that come through and use that trail. And because it's in an alpine environment, it won't break down. Like it would just be
Well,
sitting
that
in
makes a
front
lot of
and
sense
it would
then. Yeah.
destroy like the small moss. And like that ecosystem is very fragile. So if you go adding, you know, prone to human waste, it's a problem. I think Florida for the most part, because we're so humid and everything, stuff breaks down pretty well. So like and like I
You
said
say what
too, we're
can't?
not talking about like thousands of people out on the Florida Trail yet. You know, I'm sure as it grows, it'll grow in popularity and all of that. And then you have to adjust. So that's why organizations like the Florida Trail Association are so important because they help like handle those sorts of things and go, okay, there's a lot of people coming through this area. We need to set up a privy. We need to set up like a long-term solution. So that way we're not destroying the resources that we are out here to enjoy. All right. What do you do with your garbage and stuff? So you will actually, like any food wrappers or anything that you bring in, you're going to pack it back out, including, talk about our last subject, toilet paper. So you actually need to pack out your toilet paper. You don't, at minimum, bury it. But really, you know this, in Florida, there's hogs and they'll come through and they'll root everything up. And so you'll be walking through and there'll just be toilet paper everywhere. So you pack out your toilet paper, you bring a plastic bag, a gallon size like freezer bag. If you don't look at it, there's some people that will like line it with duct tape so you don't see anything that's in there. And you pack all of that out. And you have your food wrappers and stuff. You have a different garbage bag in your food bag for like food wrappers and all of that stuff. And so you pack that out, and then when you get to town, you throw it away.
Definitely be covering my bag.
I really thought
The
that I would
cutest
care
duct tape
about that
ever.
more, and then you get to a point where you're like, no, actually, this is fine. It also helps too. This all sounds really, really weird when you're like at home and clean and showered. But when you're out there and everyone else is doing the same thing, and everyone else is struggling in the same ways, you just don't
It
really.
definitely doesn't matter as much. It's, yeah.
Yeah, the community aspect of it is really cool. Like everyone is going through the same crap. Everyone is having
Literally.
to dig a hole, and everyone is, I mean, not so much in Florida, but like everyone's climbing up the same mountain struggling. In Florida, everyone's walking through the same swamp and their feet have been wet for the last 10 hours as well, you know? So there's a lot of like group commiserating that makes you really close to people in a really short amount of time. As far as like maps and stuff, there's a couple different options. You can go to floridatrail.org and get paper maps, and there's actually a guidebook. Something that a lot of hikers that I know use is an app called Far Out, and you can actually download the map on there, and then on there will be these different waypoints that are like water source, campsite, road crossing, and people can leave comments on there and be like, oh, hey, water source is dried up, or plenty of clear water, and things like that. So you get like crowdsourced information in real time about that. So that's called Far Out if you're interested. It can also be really handy for just planning day hikes and stuff, because you can like look at your map, plan out where you're going, so what your miles are, what your elevation is, which is a lot less relevant here, but still. You have any questions about any of that or anything about
The app is
hiking?
super cool. I didn't know about that. That's super cool.
Yeah, so not like every trail in the world is on it, but like there's actually a surprising amount of trails that are on there. The Wonderland Trail in Washington, when we went and did that, the Florida Trail is definitely on there, Appalachian Trail. And it's just really, really neat because you get all this information. It also can be a safety thing. I know, so there's a lot of different ways of thinking about it. A lot of people like, you need paper maps because the app will fail. Like the app can't fail. And I agree with that, especially if you're going to be out there by yourself. Like you should have two different types of navigation tools. But one of the things I really like about the app is you can get real-time information. Well, I mean, it's like anytime you get service, it reloads with the comments and stuff. But you can get information like, hey, there's a truck hanging around this road sign. Like, be aware of that. So I think it's also a huge asset as far as safety goes, where you can just see like, hey, oh no, okay, there's a bear that's been hanging around this campsite. We need to plan to hike through that and not sleep there. That sort of thing.
Like a little hiker version of Waze.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty cool.
Something else that's pretty common, and I kind of hinted at when I was talking about like getting into town, is actually hitchhiking. So I know that usually like sends all the alarm bells off, and
Still does.
still does. Yeah. But it's really, really common on the trail for people to be hitchhiking and it's just trying to get a couple miles down the road into town or even like trying to get to the doctor or something. So if you are in one of these areas, and you see people that are trying to hitchhike, I'm not gonna like advise anyone to like, just pick up any stranger you see on the road. Like you're gonna make their day, be a trail angel. Be aware. Be aware of your surroundings. Be aware of where you are. Is there a trail system in that area? Do they look like backpackers? And it's weird because backpackers and homeless people, like there's a real fine line. And I'm also not saying you shouldn't help homeless people either. But as far as like trying to figure out if somebody's sketchy, if you're wondering should I pick them up in a hitch, do they have like hiking shoes, whether it's trail runners or boots or whatever? Do they have trekking poles? You know, where are they trying to get to? What are they saying? So just
But
use
there's
common
also gonna
sense.
be like a very big difference in the bags, backpacks, and 'cause I've seen a lot of your gear and a lot of things that you guys use between you and Jared. And I feel like from what I've seen in your friends' stuff, it's pretty distinctive of like, okay, this is actual things that are being used for this. And again, like when you're in the areas, people are expecting it to. Like when you're in those big trailers, I feel like which is why hitchhiking is possible for you guys, is because it's expected.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's really very much part of the culture. We actually did it when we were in Washington, like on our honeymoon. We're like driving through, we're like, those are hikers, and we stopped and picked up 2 PCT hikers. And then we've had plenty of circumstances where like we were trying to hitch in Arizona. We actually got picked up by like a guy and his daughter who were out there to do a section hike, and they're like, oh yeah, we can drive you back real quick. So it's less of me trying to be like, pick up hitchhikers, it's a great idea, and more of be aware that this is a real thing, and it's really cool. It's really cool, a great way to meet people. I always feel like most of my interactions hitchhiking have been really like mutually beneficial. Like the person picking up feels really good and like it's a cool story. The person getting picked up is so relieved because, there was no way they were going to get to town otherwise. And that burrito and shower were calling their name, among other things. But yeah, just something to be aware of. Another kind of quirky, cool, weird, I don't know, you can define it if you want. I'm a nerd. Thing that happens with like the trail hiking culture is trail names. So I don't know where this stems from. I think it's kind of like, in the military too, a lot of people will have like a nickname or something that's like their thing. And it's the same thing with thru hikers. It comes from like you spend a lot of time, somebody does something silly, that becomes their trail name, and that's how you refer to them. For some people too, it's nice because then you don't have to like give everyone your full name, your government name, and they're easier to remember and they're fun. So my trail name is Surgeon or Sturgeon, depending on which trail you met me on. Um, my husband's trail name is Rapunzel. It's really fun when you start telling stories, and Megan can attest to this because I've been like, oh yeah, so Blue's going to be our efficient, and Sunny's going to be there too, and Parkour and Jetpack are going to take video for us, and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, what? What are you talking about?
I know, I'm like, who? I know these people, but like, I'm not sure who's who anymore now.
Yeah.
Like, I've heard both names.
Okay, so Parkour and Jetpack are married, but like, which one's which? So it's a lot of fun. They come from different things. So if you end up following I'm going to recommend some people to follow if you're interested in seeing videos of the Florida Trail and different trails. When you see that they have trail names, that's where that comes from. It's pretty cool.
Are you gonna share how you got your name?
Sure. So my trail name on the AT was Surgeon, and I got that because my lovely husband was walking around the shelter barefoot and went to step off from the ledge and hit a rock really hard and scraped up the heel of his foot and like caught it up pretty bad. Like we had to get off trail the next day. And so I was there like cleaning, squeezing a water bottle with soap into it and like cutting off the extra skin. And I didn't actually have to do stitches, but I did all of that. And then I was like, well, I don't want to get called nurse. I'm picking surgeon for myself. So at that point I became surgeon. And then on the Arizona Trail, I get hiccups really bad. And we were hiking with our buddy Jordan or Casper. And he turned around.
His name is Casper?
Yeah, his name's Casper.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So we were hiking with him, and I was like going into these hiccuping episodes, and I'm hiccuping for like a quarter mile. And he turns around and it's like, you're a fish. You're a fish. Like, stop it. You're forgetting that you're a fish. And I was just like, what does that mean? And then I started hiccuping. So every time
I didn't know this story.
they'd be like,
I didn't know about that.
So that's the thing. It's like some of these are like really well thought out, and like I am this because this is a goddess warrior, blah blah blah, and I'm going to finish. And then others are like, yeah, I got called dipshit because I accidentally dipped my backpack in my shit. Like it runs the gamut. But yeah, so they kept yelling anytime I'd start hiccuping, they just yell fish, or it evolved to fish, which isn't even a word. And then they're like, well, you're not surgeon anymore, you're sturgeon because you're a fish.
I was wondering because I was like, I think surgeons, that's a fish. I'm like 90% sure maybe I was wrong, but no.
Jared got Rapunzel because like on the very first night there was a window banging on the shelter, and so he went up to this was like a second story one. So he like went up to it, we're all down below having a conversation, he just like chimes into the conversation, like sticks his head out the window and like shouts down at us, and we're like, Rapunzel, let down your beard. And he tried to he was like, it can't be Rapunzel, and it's the first day. I'm not supposed to tell him on the first day. But for like the next 3 days he'd introduce himself as Jared, maybe Rapunzel, and everyone's like, dude, you gotta be Rapunzel. And if you guys haven't seen him, but big red beard, big guy, like does not look like a German princess. Maybe act like one, but doesn't look like one.
It's strangely fitting though.
Yes, it works very well. He does own it. But yeah, so that's just some of the stuff. Like I would say, if you're curious, like look more into, there's lots of videos. If a thru hike is something that you've been thinking about for a long time or have like looked into, but you're just like, I can't imagine taking that time off work, I can't imagine doing that, like that's too much. Really, really look at that. Like really think about it more. Because there's never going to be a convenient time to take 6 months or 3 months or even 2 weeks off of work. There's never going to be a convenient time to do a lot of things, but that doesn't mean that they're not worth doing. So if it's something that's like been on your heart and you're like eating this up and you're like, oh, I want this, figure out how to make it happen because it's totally possible. That's my soapbox. So back to the Florida Trail in particular. So Florida Trail offers some pretty unique challenges, as I'm sure you could guess, Maegan. What you lack in mountains and elevation, you're going to make up for in swamps and just totally different atmosphere. And the cool thing too with Florida is you start in the swamps. I've heard horror stories of people like walking through water for weeks. And if you're not from Florida and not used to our wildlife here, it can be pretty freaky for a lot of people. I mean, honestly, it'd be pretty freaky for us too to think like, well, we know there's gators in this water. We know that there's snakes, and all of that. So you start with like walking through swamp. You're going to get through areas that are pine forest. You're going to get through areas that are prairie, which all like absolutely beautiful in their own right. None of it's going to be very difficult elevation wise, but any thru hiker can tell you, like, you get all excited when you're like, oh, I'm going to make up some really big miles because I'm walking on flat. Kills your hips. It just uses different muscles. So it's still very tough. It's still, you're still walking 15 to 30 miles a day, which is just, it's a lot. You're also going to have to be concerned with bugs. The wildlife is very different than what most people are used to. Not that I think it's particularly dangerous in any way. Like, grizzlies freak me out way more, but it's still a lot to come to terms with mentally for a lot of people. And it's so funny because every time we go on a hike, everyone's like, oh, you're from Florida? Have you done the Florida Trail? And I'm like, no. And they're like, would you do the Florida Trail? I'm like, that's complicated. I don't know. And there's so many people that have done some crazy trails and been like, where there's grizzlies, where they're like finding their own way, where there's not even a trail or high elevation, like high risk situations that are like, I'm not doing the Florida Trail. Absolutely not. That's just a whole different beast. And I don't think that it's actually that much more dangerous than anything else. I think in some ways it's probably a lot less dangerous, but I think uh, mentally alligators are creepy. Um,
Just a tad.
yeah, I think like the real thing that's gonna get you is mosquitoes, which are quite the reason to not do things too. And it's interesting too because the time that you're doing it, most of the time it's probably gonna be really pleasant. Like this winter has been gorgeous so far, but there's still a chance it's gonna get up to like upper 80s, 90s, and there's still a chance you're gonna have freeze night. And you've got Florida, which is like wet cold. So every cold front that comes through is coming through with rain first, and then wind, and then you're gonna be cold. So like there's a lot of things that you have to adjust for with Florida. But also you're gonna have unique plants and wildlife that you're only gonna get to see here. So it's pretty crazy. You start from swamp, you get to go through the pine flatwoods, you get to go through the oak groves, you get to go through cedar hammocks. You're going to see all the bromeliads, the air plants, totally unique wildlife. You end at the beach, like you end at white sand beaches, which is pretty insane. So highly, highly recommend. The Florida Trail is still pretty young, and one of the critiques is that there's still a bit of road walking. So road walking is just that there's not like a trail in the forest yet. So you're connecting pieces. So that's definitely a critique. But I actually heard an interview of like a guy who packed out a lightweight skateboard and then on the road walks, rode a skateboard. So there's lots of ways that people are getting around it. Like I said, I think if I was going to do it, I'd probably do it in sections, and I'd probably consider biking those road walk sections or just skipping them all together. Everyone hike your own hike. And that road walking is going to get better. So the reason I mentioned is like the trail is still young. It was started in 1966. It's when the first trail markers were put up in Ocala National Forest. And then the trail was officially designated as a National Scenic Trail in 1983.
Do you know how many people since that time have done the Florida Trail?
It's estimated that only about 100 people have completed it as a through hike. Yeah. So it's still very, very young. It's still definitely gaining in popularity. And so like as it grows and as more time goes by, more and more of that like road walk will get moved onto trail. Part of it is like sometimes the state has to actually buy land. Sometimes they work out partnerships. Like one of the places that you have to get a permit is on an Air Force base. But they looked at a permit where like, no, people can walk through it. Now, obviously, there might be certain times that you're not going to get that permit granted because they're using that land. There's lots of different ways that the land comes together and gets used, and then it all has to get marked and the trail laid out on it.
Okay.
So the Florida Trail is a National Scenic Trail. So what's a National Scenic Trail? National Scenic Trails are intended to showcase our country's spectacular natural resources and beauty. They are routes of outstanding recreation opportunity and are primarily for non-motorized continuous trail and extend for 100 miles or more. The routes traverse beautiful terrain and connect communities, significant landmarks, and public lands. So there are 11 different ones. You've got the AT that we already talked about, the PCT, Pacific Crest Trail, and the CDT, Continental Divide, that we just talked about. The Arizona Trail that Jared and I did is about 800 miles in Arizona. The Florida Trail that we're talking about now. You've got the Ice Age Trail, which is in Wisconsin. Natchez Trace Trail, which is in Mississippi. There's a New England Trail, which is in Connecticut and Massachusetts. Potomac Heritage, which is in DC, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. And then the North Country Trail, which is the longest, which is 4,100 miles, 4,000 miles. Minnesota, North Dakota, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Vermont, and Wisconsin. So it like goes across the top of the U.S. It's pretty crazy.
Well, that's cool.
Mm-hmm. And then another one that's high on my list is the Pacific Northwest Trail, which goes Montana to Idaho to Washington. So you start in Glacier and you end in Olympic National Park.
That sounds so cool.
So high on my list. Way out there though. So those are just the ones that are National Scenic Trails. They all have to be at least 100 miles, but they're all vary in length and everything. And those aren't the only backpacking trails. In some ways, they're not even the most popular ones. There's actually a trail that connects the Florida Trail to a much larger system, which is the Eastern Continental Trail. So for the Eastern Continental Trail, you would start or either end at Key West. So you're going to start down in the Florida Keys and then do about 200 miles of road walk to get to the start of the Florida Trail. Because remember, the Florida Trail doesn't start in the Keys, it starts in Big Cypress. Then you're going to do the 1,500 miles of the Florida Trail. And then from there, you do a road walk up to Alabama. You get on the Pinhoti Trail, which we did a section of a couple years ago, which is through Alabama and Georgia. So you get on the Pinhoti, which means turkey, to Alabama, Georgia, get on the Benton MacKaye Trail in Georgia, attach that to the Appalachian Trail, do 2,200 miles of the AT, get on the International Appalachian Trail, and go up through Canada and end up in New Brunswick.
Wow.
Yeah, that is about 4,400 miles or 7,100 kilometers.
It's a lot.
So much. So yeah, that's so cool. That trail system was named by a long distance hiker, whose trail name is Nimble Nomad. And we actually got to meet him on the Pinhoti. Yeah, I love the trail names. But that guy, he's so cool. He is, I want to misquote, but I think he's in his 80s. He's actually from Florida originally too. He was like a eye doctor up in Tampa, and then one day quit. It was like, all right, I'm retiring, and then just started walking, and did all of the big trails. Did the international, did this Eastern Continental Divide Trail. Just started walking. That's his thing. We actually met him on the Pinhoti. He was one of the caretakers at the southern terminus.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And then the first person to complete the ECT from Key West to Cap to a place in Quebec was John Brenda in 1997.
Oh, 1997.
Right? That's a good year. So yeah. Any other questions about like the Florida Trail and stuff?
On the Florida Trail, do you have your next trail planned? Are you thinking after doing this, like maybe doing a section of the Florida Trail? Or I know it's kind of the time to do it would be like now, so maybe not now or for any time coming up, but
yeah. So we've done a very small section of it. So I would recommend, if you're in the Tampa area or Ocala area, Ocala National Forest section is beautiful, and the Inverness Florida Citrus Loop is gorgeous, and we absolutely love it there. And the cool thing is around there's like a sinkhole, the little sinkholes that you can go in. You've actually been there. Dane Caves and Peace Caves.
Oh yeah, okay.
They're like large cave sinkholes. So that's a beautiful area. There's actually a loop that part of it's on the Florida Trail, part of it's just connecting you back to your car. But that's a gorgeous area, and there's springs around there. So I would highly recommend anyone that's in that area get out and check out that spot. Yeah, so everyone always asks, like, would you guys thru hike the Florida Trail? I don't think I'd ever thru hike it just because I'm from here and I know the bugs and I know all this stuff, but I'm very interested in doing it in sections. There's actually like a bike route to do the Key section where you like start in one and go to Key West and come back. I'm very interested in doing that on a bike. I'm very interested in thru hiking sections of it. Like I said, there is going to be one of these days where I call you up and I'm like, hey, can you pick me up and can we crash on your floor for a day after we do this section? I don't know that it's like, there's so many places that I want to hike that are out of state, that are in the mountains, that are different than here, that I don't see myself thru hiking it, honestly.
I think that's kind of my, like, I mean, obviously I've never done one or anything, but if I ever did, and if I ever felt like this is something I really wanted to get into, I don't think I'm going to pick the Florida Trail as like there's one, and not that there's anything, like you said, there's nothing wrong with it, but, again, mosquitoes, I don't particularly want to walk with my feet wet for hours, and potentially longer. There's just a lot of things that for me personally, and I think for you too, like we're not sold on it. Sections of it would be good.
Absolutely love the idea of sections of it. Definitely want to get into more of the history of different places that are along the Florida Trail. Like I said, it's like a sub goal of mine that like, oh, Florida Trail through hikers are listening to this podcast and learning stuff about the places that they're walking through. I would definitely love to do more sections, but I just don't think it's on how things for
The
me.
only question I kind of do have is like, is what decides what areas are going to be part of like what makes it a through hike and like, does that kind of make
Yeah,
sense?
like the trail planning process.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so there's a lot that goes into it. I probably should have done a little bit more research about it for this. But generally, my understanding is when one goes, okay, we've got this idea, we want to do this. And they start with connecting natural spaces that are already preserved. What national parks, national reserves, state parks, state forests can we go through? Because those places are already state property, they're already wild, blah, blah, blah. And then there'll be different areas around there where they go, okay, how can we work with the people that live here or work here and buy some of this land or get easements where it's still owned by private owner? It's going to happen a lot with like farm property and stuff, where it's like, okay,
Okay, that makes
this is
sense.
still your land, but can we get an easement so that people can walk through here to connect this place and that place? But that's how it works in the U.S. In like other countries, there's different ways that property is looked at differently where it's like everyone actually has it's called like a right to roam, where you can like go through um different people's property as long as you're like being respectful. But every place is gonna be a little bit different. So in the US, like it's a lot of the state trying to purchase the property to connect it. That's why some of it's still on roads, because it's in the process of okay, can we get the money to buy this land because they have to buy it. Unfortunately, there's like a pretty messed up history of the National Park Service and the National Forest Service kind of pushing particularly poor farmers like Appalachia, kind of pushing them out or tricking them out of their land to put together things like national parks and the National Trail Service. So it's messy. It's very, very messy. Not always. And I think that generally they're trying to do better now. But like in their 1930s and 40s when that was happening, for the Appalachian Trail, there's some pretty messy things happening where people are kind of getting tricked or getting their land pulled out from under them. And of course, it's never the people that have the money to fight with lawyers. It to come across to affect most the poor people that are trying to do it. So I don't want to be like, oh, it's all perfect. We just get the stuff and everyone donates their land and comes together as this community thing. Even though I think that the trail is really impactful and it's really important to have these wild spaces because if you have a corridor that people can walk on, you also are creating a wildlife corridor that animals can travel on safely. And that's really important to keep everything connected instead of getting fragmented into all these developments. Yeah, so it's a combination. It kind of answers and doesn't answer your question at all, but it's a
Well, no, I mean, it really bases kind of around like what land is available. And so I imagine because the Florida Trail does have so much road that you're going to be walking on and stuff, that eventually, once it's all kind of been figured out and things, the Florida Trail will probably be changing, I guess, a little bit. And kind of where, like, when you're getting to those points of the road and where it'll probably move a little bit,
yeah.
eventually and through
That
the
actually
next
brings
couple of
me
years,
to my
hopefully, and
next
stuff.
point perfectly. So you're talking about like how the trail is going to change and adjust a little bit year to year. That happens anyways, even if there's not like new land being acquired, because hurricanes come through and you have blowdowns and things and stuff has to be rerouted or rivers flood and things change direction. And so the way that that's all maintained is by groups of volunteers. So if this is something that you are interested in hiking or just interested in learning more about, check out the Florida Trail Association at floridatrail.org. And what they do is they create a network of volunteers that come out and they set up different work days in these different areas of like, okay, we had this year is huge, we had big hurricanes come through. So there's whole sections of the trail that need to be repaired and fixed. And they organize people. There's people that help provide funds. There's people that know how to work a chainsaw. There's people that know how to organize everyone. And so they go through and they get the areas cleaned up. I actually just registered with them to volunteer. So
That's so cool.
yeah, it's really, really cool. And this was something that was recommended to me when I was on the Appalachian Trail, because like we were talking to people, and a lot of the people that are maintaining these trails are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, because it's a little bit of both. It's like, well, they're the ones that are retired and have the time, but also a lot of times like we need more young people out here. There's only so much we can do. So it was really important to us, like when we got home, that we wanted to volunteer. Now, unfortunately, where we are, we're still like 2 to 3 hours away from most of the events that they do, but still, there's a lot of ways that you can help. And the cool thing with that too is then you're getting that community. Even if you're not through hiking, you're still going to be around a community of people that really care about the same things that you care about, and you get to work outside with people. So I think it's really important, the work that they're doing. So I highly recommend anyone's interested, get on there, even just get on their email list, because you'll find out about cool events and other stuff that they're doing, and things that are happening with the trail that you wouldn't know otherwise. Also on their website, they've got day hikes and maps. So there's a whole section on like different places you can go for day hikes. So if you're like, all right, I got some time this weekend and I'm not set up to go overnight, I am not set up to camp, but I know that the Florida Trail is around me, and I've got Gracie's Night Club. She's the cutest. And Gracie and I want to go out for a hike. You can go on their website and find information about what's in my area and do some day hikes.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
Absolutely. Highly recommend. Like I said, we talk about thru hikers today, but the majority of users aren't going to be thru hikers. The majority of users are going to be day hikers and overnight and trail volunteers that are helping and maintaining the trail. So this is a resource for all of us. This is, as citizens, like this is something that we have some ownership in, which is really, really cool. I love that about like the state forest and national parks, and the national scenic trails. So yeah, check out their volunteer opportunities and events. And then they actually have 2 events coming up that I wanted to highlight. So one is Trail Days, which is going to be February 7th through 9th in White Springs. I think we're going to be up there at least the 7th, maybe part of the 8th. And it's a trail celebration of like all the work that's been done, celebration of the hikers that are coming through. It's at about the halfway point. So like the hikers come through, they get celebrated. Yeah. There'll be speakers there, outdoor retailers. So if you were like, oh, I kind of want to check out this gear or something, you can like try stuff on. And there'll be like a lot of little niche companies that got super ultra light gear that you can't try on otherwise. So you get to like go and try it on. It's fun. It's nerdy stuff, but it's fun. And then you get to like meet the hikers and just be part of that culture. So I highly recommend if you're in the area. That's February 7th through the 9th. You can check out their information on there. And then they also are doing an event called I Did a Hike in Denellen. So it's like by the Rainbow River area. And that's going to be on March 1st. And I was looking into it. It looks like it's a community hike. It's like there's a 10-mile option, cool. Shorter option. Yeah, where you like show up, and I think it's ticketed, kind of like a 5K or something. But you get a super cool t-shirt. The design on it's fantastic. I want just the t-shirt. I want to do the event too, but yeah, and it's like this big group hike, and same thing, they're gonna have speakers, celebration, and it's a fundraiser. There's a silent auction, and it's a fundraiser to maintain, take care of, maintain, and expand the trail. That's, like you said, there's a lot of work that goes into that, between having to raise funds to when land does become available, being able to buy it up, being able to fund the trail maintenance. Not that people are getting paid to do it, but you still have to put gas in trucks and maintain chainsaws and buy paint for it. There's so much that goes into it. So that's going to be the I Did a Hike event on March 1st. So yeah, check that out. If you are interested in like seeing actual videos and following people that are doing it, first of all, there's a lot of videos and stuff on YouTube, but there's 2 people that I follow that I really, really like. One is Madison Blagden, or Pigleg is her trail name. I'm following her on Instagram. She is doing a border-to-border calendar year Triple Crown, which is a lot of words. And so the Triple Crown is the big 3 trails: the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, and the Continental Divide Trail. She's doing all 3 of those in 1 year. Yeah. So she started January 1st, and so She's doing all of those, but she's doing it as a border to border. So the PCT and the CDT go Mexico to Canada, but the Appalachian Trail starts in Georgia and goes to Maine. She is going to extend that. She's doing that Eastern Continental Divide Trail. So she's doing Key West, which would be the southern border on this end, all the way up through Alabama, all of that, and then up to Canada. Yes. So it's going to be
That's a lot.
it's like almost 9,000 miles, probably more. I'm not sure. So you can follow her at Madison Blagden, MADISON BLAGDEN. She actually puts videos out every day. Just
Wow, really?
so,
Wow,
yeah,
on the trail.
on the trail. So she might already be done with Florida by the time we get off this, because she's moving. She's doing like 30 to 40 miles every day.
I was gonna say, I just did the math, and like, if you take like 9,000 miles, and I mean, in a year, there's 365 days, that's like averages out to about 25. You have to at least be doing like 25 miles a day.
Yeah. So right now she's
So
doing
lots
30
of
to 40.
miles daily.
And so like the interesting thing with that too is you have to like really be aware of the weather, because it can get
And it's gonna be really
dangerously
cold
cold in
other
next 30.
places. Yeah,
So she's
that's
really
crazy.
and then also on YouTube there's a guy, Jupiter Hikes. His videos are super, super awesome. They're really inspiring to us when we were getting into backpacking. And he's actually originally from Jupiter, Florida.
Nice.
Yep. He's actually back on the Florida Trail. He's probably hiked the Florida Trail like 3 or 4 times. I forget, like a ridiculous amount of times he's hiked the Florida Trail. But he's back and, trying to find a place where he can hike right now in the winter. And so he's back with his girlfriend showing her the place. So, like I said, they will probably both honestly be done with the Florida Trail by the time we get this podcast is aired, just because they're moving really quickly. But you can still go back and see the backlog of their videos of the Florida Trail, and also just they're doing some really awesome adventures. So yeah. If you are less interested in strictly Florida Trail and more my backpacking adventures, I'm still posting my AZT updates, and you can follow me at Kaylee Hikes. Kaylee.hikes, Kaylee. Not hikes. Do you have anything you want to plug, Maegan?
I don't actually. I think I'm assuming we're probably going to share that link, because I'm curious about looking up the different events that are going on. And so I want to make sure that we'll probably have those shared.
Yeah, we'll link
and
to
the
all
links to
those
get to that, and some of the maps and stuff that we talked about. We'll have that linked so that it's a lot easier to what we were talking about.
Perfect. And also, if anyone that's listening to this is currently hiking it or has hiked the Florida Trail or going out for a day hike, send us your stories and your pictures. We'd love to see what you're doing and hear all about it. So love to connect more with like the trail community on here. Yeah, I'll have the email for that in the show notes, because once again, at the time of recording, we don't know the podcast name yet. So
If anyone has ideas,
more than we do.
if we don't have one by the time that we've actually posted this, please share any ideas that anyone has, please.
Sure.
We are desperate if we
have
haven't
to have
figured
a
it out.
placeholder.
Right?
All right. Well, that's it for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Happy hiking.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day.